Hey guys, Black Dragon 13 here. What did you guys think of Chapter 3? Comment down below. But anyway, um, yeah, I'm now reading Chapter 4 of Getting Back on Your Hooves. Um, but yeah, like I said in the last one, Chapter 3 is probably my all-time favorite because of the Prince Blue Blood and Twilight scene. Um, yeah, anyway, um, let's get down to reading, shall we? Chapter 3, Stitching It Together. No, no, not again, said Twilight, contorting in terror in her sleep. Oh, and I must say, this one's kind of a long one, so please bear with me. I may also split this up into several parts. I don't know yet, which I'm probably going to have to anyway. But just please bear with me. This is kind of a long chapter. Um, yeah, please. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. No, not again, said Twilight, contorting in terror in her sleep. Images of what Discord had put her through flashing through her mind, only this time no matter what she did, nothing helped. Nothing changed anything. Stop. Leave my friends alone, Discord. Please, leave them alone. Twilight shot awake when she felt a hoof on her shoulder, panting heavily from fear. She looked over to see Trixie looking back at her in concern. Trixie? She said, startled. She looked over to see the clock midnight, feeling a pang of guilt at awakening the poor mare in the middle of the night. Sorry. It is fine, Twilight, said Trixie, her voice honest, even somewhat sympathetic. Another nightmare? Trixie guesses. She would have thought that a pony like you would have found a way to deal with the mere nightmare in all of these books. Trixie sighed, lowering her head in sorrow. I've done everything I can think of, she said, her voice a little shaky. Nothing works, she muttered. Sick and tired of being tormented by nightmares like this, she looked up everything she could find, but she still continued to find everything that worked. She was starting to think Discord had put some kind of spell on her. I know they're not real, but I just can't make them stop. Trixie actually gave a sympathetic look. Trixie thought she looked conflicted for a moment. Or, not Trixie, thought she looked conflicted for a moment. Twilight, believe it or not, Trixie may have the solution to your plight, she explained in a thoughtful tone. Twilight blinked in confusion. Was Trixie actually helping her? But still, the possibility of being rid of the horrid nightmares she'd been having was rather tempting. Really? She asked, not really able to think of much else to ask. Trixie nodded, still looking a tad uncertain. Yes, it's quite simple, really. You're not going to sing, are you? Trixie's eyes widened as she looked rather confused. Of course not. Why ever would you ask such a thing? Gee, I wonder. Oh, it's nothing. Just when we were bitten by a bunch of monster trees in Everfree Forest, Pinky said something like that and burst into a song spontaneously, recounted Twilight, then saw Trixie giving her a raised eyebrow. Nightmare Moon used illusions to try and scare us off. Pinky tends to explain beneficial insights she has with random musical numbers, along with how to make cupcakes. Excuse me. Trixie understands. She was actually more confused about the monster trees than the singing. Well, anyway, it's quite simple. What are you doing? Twilight blinked telekinetically, holding a notebook and a quill in front of her. Taking notes. Trixie rolled her eyes slightly at this. Twilight, there's no need to. Actually, on second thought, Trixie kind of likes this. Kind of likes that. You may continue, she replied, allowing Twilight to get back to taking notes. As Trixie was saying, when having a nightmare, look for the parts of it that do not make sense. Dreams are by their very nature imperfect because of our minds hastily craft the dream world when it begins. So there's always something that tells us it's a falsehood, something that doesn't match up with what we know is or was. The reality, something which has no other explanation apart from being a part of a dream. Even if the nightmare takes place in Discord's chaotic world, there's going to be something that's off. Finding this glitch, so to speak, will let you know it's a dream or a nightmare. And once you know it's a dream, you can control it with ease. Are you following Trixie, Twilight? Asked Trixie, falling back into a radical theatrical manner of speaking. Not, not quite as bombastic as her magic show act, but still putting a good bit of energy into her words, as well as hoof motions into at certain points. Twilight nodded, hanging on her explanation and taking her notes as she did so. Truthfully, Trixie was pretty fun to listen to when she wasn't talking just to hear herself talk or publicly humiliating ponies. And Trixie seemed to actually be enjoying herself. Yes, please continue. Good. Now let's say Trixie was having a nightmare about an encounter with with certain terrifying monstrous star-covered beast, said Trixie, a little fear worming its way into her voice. Trixie saw the poor mare give a shudder at the mention of the Ursa. She really couldn't blame the poor girl regardless. She was surprised as the mare magically created an image of herself running from an Ursa similar to the one she'd created during her original story at the magic show. Say she noticed that the mare in the moon was still in her prison, or that her own cutie mark's colors were reversed, or that those two dumb colts that ruined her life weren't standing right next to her the whole time, she said, almost shouting at the end, the image changing to match her words, the last of which being her about to hit a cowering Snips and Snails with the mallet. Trixie seemed to catch herself and cleared her throat, wiping away the last image. Anyway, at that point, Trixie knows she's in a nightmare and can control. So instead of running, she vanquishes the Ursa minor. No, major, maybe. Anyway, do you understand, Twilight? Twilight nodded, finishing her notes. It actually made sense to some degree, and it was right up Twilight's alley. Logic was, of course, on her strong suits, but still, after everything Twilight tried, she was understandably unsure about the method, and Trixie was actually pretty good at making it interesting. I've never heard something like that. Does it really work? Has Trixie awakened screaming that one of those creatures was trying to eat her? Asked Trixie, doing her best to maintain her theatrical manner. Twilight blinked and shook her head. No. Well, there you go. Trixie has used this trick since she was a little filly. It works every time. Trust me. Twilight, if it didn't work, Trixie wouldn't have get any sleep, replied Trixie, trying to maintain her tone by giving a yawn. An angry growl came from nearby. Both the again, I cannot read. Both girls looked over to see a rather cranky Spike glaring at them from his bed. You're not the only one who's not getting any sleep. Sorry, Spike, said Twilight, looking at her assistant sheepishly. She then looked over at Trixie, climbed back to her bed. Trixie, thank you. You're actually a really good teacher. Twilight slinked back into under her covers, giving a yawn. She really hoped this worked. So that part of the story, that was actually, I believe it does work because I have tried it myself. Surprisingly, a couple of years ago, I kept having nightmares about certain people and whatever. And I had tried that method numerous times and it still wouldn't work at first. But after I've learned to finally figure out how, I finally was able to not wake up with nightmares or things like that. So, as a personal person who has actually done it, it really works, but you've got to have, for some reason, I think you have to have an open mind, and I think, I could be completely wrong on that part, but, and yeah, I will just say it does work after so many times of trying. Don't give up. Don't think it won't work because it will. So, anyway, I really got to stop saying so. Anyway, and that too. Trixie snarled, scrubbing her mane for the second time this morning. She'd pretty much tried everything she could think of, but her mane was still the same shade of pink. It had been since her tomato juice bath the previous day, as was her tail. Trixie just gave a sigh and gave up on that. Oh well, at least I don't still smell like a skunk, she stated in annoyance. The horrid stench still rather fresh in her memory, as were her own actions from the previous night. Trixie gave a small sigh at the thought. I never thought Twilight Sparkle and I would ever have anything in at all in common, let alone that I'd be willing to help her with the same problem that I used to have, or that I'd actually feel good about it, she muttered. Sure, being the center of attention to the point her audience was actually taking notes felt good. But that wasn't the only reason it felt good. Just the only reason she really understood. She thought back to her own similar experience that had made her sympathetic to Twilight's plight. Trixie dear, what's wrong? Asked the elderly unicorn mare, looking down at the little filly in front of her, who was half asleep. Trixie looked up at her with tired eyes. It's nothing, Grandma. She said, being interrupted by her own yawn. Trixie, don't try to hide something from your grandma. She can tell when something is wrong, said her grandmother, pulling the child closer to her. Trixie gave a sad sigh. I've been having lots of nightmares about an Ursa Major attacking the town and trying to eat me. Poor dear. No wonder you look so exhausted, said the wise old unicorn, nuzzling the child. Want to know a secret for dealing with those kinds of dreams? But Daddy and Big Sister say, I know your daddy and sister say. Don't forget that I raised your daddy from a little colt. I know how he is. But I'm teaching you, not helping you. There's a difference. And she'll never admit to it, but I taught your big sister the same thing when she was your age. Trixie looked a little confused and nodded with a sweet little smile. All right, Grandma, I'll listen. Her grandmother nodded with a warm smile. All right, now it's pretty simple, really. When a dream starts, your mind crafts a world for it to take place in, but because it whips them up so quickly, there's always a glitch to find. Find that glitch, and the dream is yours to control. Trixie looked at her reflection, finding herself giving a small smile at her memory. You need to stop spending so much time around Grandma, or you'll turn out just like her, weak and a failure, and you don't want that now, do you? Which turned to a frown quickly. Trixie turned away from the mirror with her head low. Now, I will have to say that, you know, sorry, I'm a little distracted here. The memory things, memory jumps, they're really, really neat. I will say that. And I will say there's a lot of them in this chapter. Anyway, sorry, spoiler. Good morning, Trixie, said Twilight, seeming especially perky this morning as she made breakfast. Spike already eating some gems. Good morning, said said Trixie, blinking in surprise as she descended down the stairs. Trixie sees that you're in a good mood, Twilight Sparkle. Twilight nodded, floating food to the table. Yeah, your advice really worked. Once I realized it was a dream, everything was fine, she stated, setting the table, keeping a rather large smile on her face. She couldn't help being in a good mood now that the nightmares that had plagued her for weeks were over. I haven't had such a good night's sleep in weeks. Yeah, neither have I, added Spike, giving a small nod as he consumed another gem. Even if they got him up in the middle of the night, it was a relief that Twilight hadn't had a nightmare afterwards to disturb him again, and hadn't had a nightmare at all, for that matter. That, and even though he didn't want to admit it, her advice had helped him with some bad dreams too, involving his last birthday. Trixie is glad she could be of assistance, Trixie stated, taking her place at the table quickly. She actually felt happy hearing that it worked, then shook it off as best as she could. Trixie merely didn't feel like being disturbed every night is all, Trixie explained, doing her best snooty look to cover herself. Twilight frowned slightly. It's all right, Twilight. Remember how hard it was for you to finally make friends? She thought, knowing she'd been quite antisocial herself before moving to Ponyville. Well, whatever your reason, I really owe you one. Trixie nodded slowly and grinned. There were a great many things that ran through her head at the moment. Twilight, just to clarify, when you say "oh Trixie one," Twilight sighed with an annoyed look. No, I can't ask Princess Celestia to make you the royal court magician. Trixie pouted. Oh well, it was worth a shot, she muttered under her breath, though truthfully she kind of felt glad that was the case, and also truthfully, even Trixie didn't even know why she did. She certainly wanted to be a royal court magician. Whatever it was, for some reason, asking such a thing didn't seem proper right now. Hey, if she'd do something like that, don't you think Rainbow Dash would have been a Wonderbolt by now? Asked Spike. Good point. Well, will you at least tell Trixie one thing? What? Did Fluttershy really outstare a cockatrice? Twilight nodded. Yeah, it ambushed me and turned me to stone on the way to a friend of mine who lives in the Everfree Forest. I think a snail crawled on my eye, she said, giving a shudder. Discord was right. Being turned to stone was not fun. Anyway, she saved a group of fillies from the darn thing and got it. Sorry, didn't mean to blow into that. Discord was right. Being turned to stone was not fun. Anyway, she saved a group of fillies from the darn thing and got it to turn me back to normal. If it weren't for her, who knows how long I'd been a statue. Trixie's jaw dropped in surprise. Told you so, said Spike with a chuckle. Scootaloo rode her scooter at top speed towards her and the other Crusaders. Clubhouse, wings flapping to provide propulsion. She couldn't wait. She couldn't wait for what they were supposed to do today. None of them could. She wouldn't stop for anything. Hey, Scoots, called a familiar voice. Except that. Scootaloo skidded to a stop, looking up to see Rainbow Dash flying above her. Hey, Rainbow Dash, called the little filly, ecstatic to have her idol call for her no matter what the reason. Rainbow Dash descended, flapping her wings one last time to soften her landing. She gave the filly a smile. She could always count on Scootaloo, her number one fan. Hey, could you do me a little favor? Sure, Rainbow Dash, anything. Alright, you know Trixie? Asked Rainbow seriously. Scootaloo gave a growl. That bully who did that awful stuff to you and Sweetie Belle and Apple Bloom's sisters? What about her? Rainbow Dash nodded, glad at least Scootaloo agreed with her. She's staying with Twilight. I think she's got every pony else fooled, but not you, right? Rainbow gave a nod. Yeah, not me. I've been keeping an eye on her, but I've got some work to do to prepare for the storms we're going to be getting from the tropical storm. You and the other Crusaders are going to Rarities, right? Scootaloo nodded quickly. Yeah, I'm going to meet up with Apple Bloom to head over there. Why? Well, Trixie's got a job working there today. Mind keeping an eye on her for me while you're there and telling me what she's up to? Scootaloo didn't hesitate and nodded quickly. Of course, Rainbow Dash. And I'm sure Apple Bloom will too. After all, Trixie heard her big sis too. Rainbow smirked and ruffled the little Pegasus mane. I knew I can count on you. Thanks, she stated, then flapped her wings to get back into the air. See you later, Scoots, she called, giving a salute and flying off to do her job. Scootaloo returned to the salute. I've got a mission from Rainbow Dash, and who knows, maybe I'll get a spine cutie mark, she said, wondering what one would look like, briefly, before remounting her scooter and taking off for the clubhouse. Oh boy. Boy, everybody's against Trixie. Well, at least Rainbow Dash and Scootaloo, anyway. Twilight, Trixie doesn't like this, said Trixie in a nervous tone as they stood outside Carousel Boutique. Twilight looked back to Trixie. Why not? Trixie looked at Twilight like it was obvious, then pointed to her pink mane and tail. Twilight gave a slightly annoyed sigh. Trixie, Rarity is not going to make fun of your mane. She's not like that. Twilight, Trixie knows you think the best of your friends, but do not forget the most interaction she's had with this unicorn was turning her mane into a disgusting green mess in front of the entire town. Trixie, Rarity is a lot of things, but one thing she'd never do is insult some pony's bad hair day. Spike nodded right on Twilight's back. Yeah, Rarity isn't like that. Hey, wait. If you could do that to Rarity's mane, how come you can't just use magic to fix your hair? Trixie sighed, giving a slightly embarrassed look. Trixie didn't exactly study that kind of magic beyond how to make some pony's hair a mess. Her main reason for knowing it was to humiliate ponies in her act, so she never saw reason to learn more of the particular type of magic. Well, don't worry. I'm sure that Rarity won't make fun of you, said Twilight in as reassuring a voice as she could manage. And if you don't want to, there's foal sitting the cakes months-old foals with Pinkie Pie. What kind of foals? A unicorn filly and a Pegasus colt. Unicorn and Pegasus foals, said Trixie, giving it consideration. Are they in that stage? Sporadic magic surges and periodic of flight instincts kicking in? Yeah. And Poundcake is a really strong little colt, explained Spike, looking over to the mare. Trixie will pass. Besides, her nose still hasn't recovered from yesterday's skunk incident. She'd prefer not to have to change dirty diapers, Trixie added, giving a disgusted face at the thought. Spike blinked and nodded. I never thought I'd say this, but I agree with Trixie on that one, Twilight nodded, considering I spent yesterday cleaning up a stink bomb. I know how you feel, she replied, giving a likewise disgusted face. Besides, I think Pinkie has it covered. Trixie then gave a sigh of defeat. Trixie will work for Rarity, but if Rarity makes fun of her mane, Trixie will say she told you so, repeatedly and at length. Trixie sighed and rolled her eyes. Sorry, sighed and rolled her eyes, then opened the door slowly with her magic and blinked in confusion at the sight inside. Now, Applejack, you must see the need for proper attire for such a gathering, pleaded Rarity in an annoyed tone. And just what is wrong with how I dress? Asked Applejack rather sharply, glaring back at the unicorn. I don't need no big poofy gown just to show off some apples. Twilight looked to Sweetie Belle, who was simply watching from nearby. What's going on? Rarity and Applejack are fighting over some fair in Canterlot, explained the little unicorn filly, looking a little upset. She was no stranger to this, but that didn't mean she liked it. Applejack, this is a Canterlot fair, not just any old country fair, replied Rarity, importance in her tone. You had no problem dressing up for proper for the Grand Galloping Gala or Twilight's birthday party. Girls, said Twilight, trying to get their attention as Trixie merely watched, somewhat amused from the sidelines. That's 'cause those were big fancy gatherings in the Canterlot ballroom, not a bunch of farmer ponies showing off their crops. Girls? But it's still in Canterlot there are going to be tons of important ponies there. The judges are all going to be Canterlot ponies. They will expect you to look their best. Rarity, it's just a farm show. Shouldn't how the apples look matter more than how I do? Applejack, they're Canterlot ponies. Applejack, they expect every pony to look their best of all the time. Girls! Well, that's just plain dumb. Twilight sighed in annoyance as the two continued to argue. She looked to Sweetie Belle. Sweetie Belle, would you please get their attention? She asked seriously. Trixie raised her eyebrow as the filly nodded, causing Twilight and Spike to cover their ears. What's going on? Sweetie Belle inhaled deeply. And I'm sorry, I am not going to scream. Sis! Applejack! Twilight wants you! Okay, maybe I did. She yelled at the top of her lungs, which finally got the two arguing ponies' attention. Trixie just stared wide-eyed in shock. ears ringing before she shook her head to clear it. My, Trixie didn't expect such a little filly to have such a loud voice, she stated, looking over to see Sweetie Belle smiling like a little angel. In fact, she was pretty sure she even saw a halo. Spike chuckled, uncovering his ears. Just wait until we get all three of them together. Trixie's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, three of them? Twilight nodded to Sweetie Belle with a smile. Thank you, Sweetie Belle, she said, giving the filly a grateful look, before looking to her two friends and giving them a small glare. Applejack scratched the back of her head in embarrassment, while Rarity gave an ashamed sigh. I'm sorry for being so rude, Applejack, but I was not joking. In Camelot, appearance is important. These ponies there are judged very heavily based on how you look. I only wanted to help you make sure you did the best in the fair you possibly could. I know how important it is to you and your family. Applejack nodded, lowering her head in embarrassment. Yeah, I'm sorry too. I guess I was just being a bit stubborn. Camelot a whole lot better than I do, after all, and you were able to make me a good dress before. I reckon you can do it again. Just nothing too girly, alright? Wow, okay, that was a weird voice change for me. Rarity nodded, giving a small smile. I'll do my best, Applejack, but right now Trixie has come for her job and we have to work to do. I'll meet you on your farm after I'm done with work for the day. Applejack nodded, headed out with a nod. Alright, I'll be seeing ya. Rarity nodded, then looked to Sweetie Belle. Sweetie Belle, my sewing glasses are on the table in my bedroom. Sorry, not a bathroom, a bedroom. Will you be a dear and very carefully fetch them for me? Sweetie Belle gave an enthusiastic nod. Sure, sis. I'll be right back, explained the filly, running off. Any opportunity to actually help Rarity as opposed to cause a gigantic mess wasn't something she wanted to mess up. Be careful! Trixie blinked, watching AJ leave before looking to Twilight. Does that happen often? Those two bickering like that? Twilight nodded slightly. Kind of. Rarity and Applejack have dif- differing opinions on a lot of things, and they like to clash heads a lot too. Same with, I think, Applejack and Rainbow Dash as well. How do you put up with it? Asked Trixie, a bit confused as she directed the question to both mares. These six used to magical charms that literally ran on friendship. She would have expected them to be more friendly. Applejack and I may not always agree on things, but I know Applejack is a true friend, said Rarity, levitating several finished dresses into position near the sewing machines. She'll always have my back when I need it, and I shall always have hers. Twilight nodded in agreement, looking to Trixie. Friends fighting doesn't mean they're not friends, it just means they've got problems to work out. It's like I told Discord. Friendship isn't always easy, but it's worth it no matter what. Yeah, sounds like me and one of my best friends. We always bicker at each other, but we somehow always find a way to continue being friends no matter what situation what the situation is. But yeah. Anyway, back to the story. Trixie looked confused about this for a second. Then she looked somewhat sorrowful. It must feel good to have ponies that care so much about you. Twilight frowned. Trixie, is it something wrong? She asked in a concerned voice. Oh, nothing. Nothing is wrong. Trixie was just lost in thought is all, answered Trixie quickly before looking to Rarity, desperate to change the subject. What job will Trixie be doing? Rarity looked at Trixie, focusing solely on her for the first time since her arrival. Well, I need a little. Oh dear, Trixie, whatever happened to your mane and tail? Trixie sighed, having expected this. She had a rather unfortunate encounter with a skunk yesterday, she said, blushing with embarrassment before bracing herself for what she perceived as an inevitable. Oh, that's quite unfortunate. Tomato juice and white hair just do not mix, said Rarity, sympathetic in tone. Well, I will just have to do something to fix that, won't I? Trixie blinked in complete shock. Say what? Trixie gave a Twilight gave Trixie a reassuring look. Wow,